Hello there, and welcome to the Daily Dose of Lore. Tonight, we're drifting into Westeros, into 3 centuries of fire and blood, where dragons once ruled the skies, and silver-haired kings sat upon a throne forged from the swords of the defeated. We're exploring the rise and fall of House Targaryen, from Aegon the Conqueror, who unified a fractured realm through ages of glory and wisdom, into the darkness of madness and rebellion. 17 kings, each carrying the weight of crowns and the burden of legacy. Some discoveries may surprise you, others will drift by like ash on wind. If this helps you unwind, A-like helps others find their way here too. But for now, let's begin. 300 years before Robert's rebellion, a Valyrian lord named Aegon Targaryen looked across the narrow sea from his island fortress of Dragonstone and saw a land divided into 7 squabbling kingdoms, each claiming sovereignty, each blind to the power that approached on wings of flame. Aegon was not the first Targaryen to flee the doom of Valyria with dragons intact, but he would be the one to reshape the world. His sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, stood beside him, and beneath them stretched the last 3 dragons in existence: Balerion, the Black Dread, Vhagar, and Meraxes. The decision to conquer was not made lightly, though history does not record his precise reasons. Perhaps he sought to unite humanity against threats from the north, or perhaps it was simply ambition. What matters is that in the year Worst AC, Aegon landed at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush with a small army, 3 dragons, and a crown he had not yet earned. The conquest had begun. The dragons made all the difference, for no castle walls could stand against dragonfire. No army could face that terrible heat and live. Balerion alone was a creature of legend, so vast that entire towns fell under his shadow when he flew overhead. His flames burned hot enough to melt stone, to turn sand into glass, to reduce steel armor to slag in moments. Aegon wielded this power with devastating efficiency. The first great test came at the Field of Fire, where the combined armies of the Reach and the Rock, numbering in the tens of thousands, faced Aegon's much smaller force. The dragons descended, and the chronicles report that 4,000 men perished in fire in less than an hour, their screams echoing across the plains. King Mern of the Reach died in those flames, his entire bloodline extinguished. King Loren of the Rock survived, kneeling in the ash afterward. It was not a battle, it was a demonstration of futility. After the Field of Fire, resistance largely crumbled. Kings bent their knees rather than watch their kingdoms burn. Not all submission came through fire. Torrhen Stark, king in the north, marched south with 30,000 men to face the conqueror. At the banks of a river that would later be called the Trident, Torrhen looked upon the dragons circling overhead and made a choice that would echo through northern memory for 3 centuries. He knelt without fighting, surrendering his crown to save his people from dragonfire. For this, some called him Torran the Wise, others called him the king who knelt. But none could dispute that the north remained intact, its forests unburned, its castles whole. The Arryns of the Vale surrendered when Visenya and Vhagar landed in the courtyard of the Eyrie, a castle thought unreachable by any army. Even the Eyries' sky cells and mountain walls meant nothing against a dragon. One by one, the kingdoms fell or knelt, until only Dorne remained independent in the south, defiant behind their deserts and mountains. The Iron Throne itself was Aegon's masterstroke of symbolism, a monument to both unity and conquest. He commanded that the swords of his defeated enemies be gathered, not hundreds, but thousands, and brought to King's Landing, the new city he was building at the site of his landing. Aegon did not sit upon a comfortable chair or a throne of gold. Instead, he had Balerion melt those 1,000 swords together with dragon flame, twisting them into a massive, uncomfortable seat bristling with blades. The Iron Throne was deliberately harsh, asymmetric, and dangerous. Legend claims it was designed so that no foolish man could sit comfortably upon it, and many kings would cut themselves on its edges over the years. Some maesters whisper that the throne chooses its rulers, rejecting those unworthy through cuts and wounds. Whether truth or superstition, the Iron Throne became the ultimate symbol of Targaryen power. Forged in fire, built from conquest, uncomfortable by design. Aegon's queens were as formidable as the king himself, though they could not have been more different from one another. Visenya was the elder, a warrior woman who rode Vagar and wielded the Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister with lethal skill. She was stern, practical, and some said cold, devoted to duty and the security of the realm. It was Visenya who convinced Aegon to create the Kingsguard, an elite brotherhood of 7 knights sworn to protect the king with their lives, after an assassination attempt nearly succeeded in Dorne. Rhaenys was gentler, more given to art and song, riding the dragon Meraxes and winning hearts through charm where Visenya commanded respect through strength. Aegon loved both his sisters, though in different ways, and rumors persisted that he spent one night with Visenya for every 10 with Rhaenys. Together, these 3 Targaryens became the foundation of a dynasty, their faces stamped on the realm's consciousness forever: Aegon the Conqueror and his 2 queens who ruled beside him. Yet even Aegon's dragons could not conquer Dorne. The Dornish refused to meet the Targaryens in open battle where dragonfire would slaughter them wholesale. Instead, they employed guerrilla tactics, melting into the deserts and mountains, striking supply lines and vanishing before dragons could retaliate. Towns were abandoned before the Targaryens arrived, leaving only empty buildings to burn. The Dornish would not play by the rules of conventional warfare. This frustrated Aegon deeply, but it was Rhaenys who paid the ultimate price for Dorne's resistance. In 10 AC, Rhaenys and her dragon Meraxes were flying over the Dornish castle of Hellholt when a lucky scorpion bolt, a massive ballista projectile, struck Meraxes through the eye. The dragon fell from the sky, crashing into the castle courtyard below. Both Rhaenys and Meraxes died in the fall, their bodies never recovered. The loss devastated Aegon and Visenya, but particularly Aegon, who had lost his gentler, beloved queen. He would return to Dorne in fury, burning more settlements, but the Dornish still would not kneel. Eventually, Aegon accepted the bitter reality that Dorne would remain independent, at least in his lifetime. Aegon ruled for 37 years, from the Landing through the establishment of King's Landing as a true city, through wars and peace, through the construction of the Red Keep upon Aegon's high hill. He was not a cruel king, nor particularly innovative in administration. Those talents would come later in the dynasty, but he was decisive, practical, and commanded respect. He established the king's peace across 6 kingdoms, ended the constant warfare between feuding lords, and created a unified legal structure under the Iron Throne. The small folk enjoyed more stability than they had known in centuries. Aegon died peacefully in 37 AC, a rare fate for a Targaryen king. He died in his bed at Dragonstone, the island fortress of his youth, with Visenya at his side. Balerion the Black Dread outlived him by many decades, eventually dying of old age as the last of the conquest dragons. Aegon's legacy was complex: conqueror and king, burning thousands yet bringing peace, worshipped by some and feared by others. He unified Westeros under one crown, but the question of whether that unity was worth its cost in fire and blood would haunt his descendants for 3 centuries. The reign of Aegon the Conqueror established certain principles that would define Targaryen rule. First, that dragons were the source of their power. Without dragons, the Targaryens were simply another noble house with delusions of grandeur. Second, that strength and decisiveness mattered more than gentleness or mercy when securing a throne. Third, that even dragons had limits, as Dorne proved. And finally, that the Iron Throne was uncomfortable because ruling should never be easy. These lessons should have been remembered by his descendants. Some learned them well, others forgot at their peril. The conquest gave the Targaryens a kingdom, but it would take wisdom to keep it, and wisdom was a quality not every dragon king possessed. The fire that forged the realm would eventually consume it, but that ending was still 3 centuries away when Aegon closed his eyes for the last time. When Aegon the Conqueror died, the crown passed to his eldest son, Aenys, born of his beloved Queen Rhaenys, and from the moment of succession, whispers began that perhaps the wrong son had inherited. Aenys was gentle where his father had been decisive, scholarly where Aegon had been martial, prone to anxiety where the conqueror had radiated confidence. Some even dared suggest that Aenys was not truly Aegon's son at all, but rather the product of an affair, though no proof ever surfaced for such dangerous gossip. What was undeniable was that Aenys seemed ill-suited for the Iron Throne his father had forged in fire. He was not cruel, nor stupid, nor incompetent exactly, merely soft, kind-hearted in a way that kings could not afford to be. The realm sensed this weakness immediately, the way predators sense wounded prey. Throughout his 5-year reign, rebellion after rebellion erupted, each one testing whether this new Dragon King had the strength to hold his father's kingdom together. The iron in Aegon's throne cut Aenys often, leaving his hands constantly bandaged, as if the throne itself rejected him. The greatest crisis of Aenys's reign came not from external enemies, but from the faith of the Seven itself. When Aenys announced that his son Aegon would marry his daughter Rhaena, continuing the Targaryen tradition of sibling marriage to keep the bloodline pure, the faith erupted in outrage. What the Targaryens called tradition, the faith called abomination and sin against the Seven. The High Septon declared the marriage incestuous and unlawful, and across the realm, the most fervent believers took up arms. The faith militant, a military order dormant for generations, reformed with the blessing of the faith. 2 groups emerged: the warriors' sons, knights who swore celibacy and devotion to the Seven, and the poor fellows, commoners armed with axes and faith. Thousands joined their ranks, marching under rainbow banners bearing the 7-pointed star. They attacked Targaryen loyalists, burned castles of lords who supported the crown, and declared holy war against the Dragon Kings. Aenys, horrified by the violence done in the god's name, tried negotiation, clemency, and compromise. None worked. The faith would not yield, and Aenys seemed paralyzed by the scale of the crisis. The stress of constant rebellion, religious war, and the weight of his father's legacy broke Aenys's health completely. In 42 AC, after fleeing King's Landing for the safety of Dragonstone, Aenys fell ill with terrible stomach cramps and fever. The masters could do nothing as he weakened day by day, his body racked with pain. Some histories suggest he died of natural causes brought on by stress, while others whisper that his illness came too conveniently, that perhaps poison found its way into his wine. His brother Maegor, after all, would be the one to benefit from his death, and Maegor was already in Pentos, having fled Westeros years earlier after taking a second wife against Aenys's wishes. Whether by nature or by murder, Aenys perished at Dragonstone, dying at only 35 years old after a reign of mere 5 years. He left behind several children, including his eldest son Aegon, who should have inherited, but succession would not be so simple. The Faith had grown too strong, and a stronger hand would be needed to crush them. Aenys's reign proved a crucial lesson about Targaryen rule. The dragons alone were not enough without the will to use them. Aenys had dragons, had armies, had every tool his father possessed, but lacked the ruthlessness to deploy them effectively. He wanted to be loved rather than feared, to rule through consensus rather than force, and the realm punished him for that gentleness. His epitaph could have read, "Here lies a good man who should never have been king." The crown needed someone willing to do terrible things to preserve order, someone who would not flinch from necessary cruelty. That someone was already sailing back to Westeros, preparing to claim a throne that his nephew technically should inherit. Maegor the Cruel was coming, and he would show the Faith what happened when you challenged dragons. Blood would flow like wine, and the realm would learn to fear the Targaryens again. When news of Aenys's death reached Maegor in Pentos, he did not wait for proper succession or for Aenys's young son Aegon to be crowned. Instead, Maegor mounted Balerion the Black Dread, the same dragon his father Aegon had ridden to conquer Westeros, and flew directly to Dragonstone. There, before Aenys's body had even grown cold, Maegor placed his father's crown upon his own head and declared himself king. He was usurping his nephew's throne, violating every principle of succession. But Maegor understood what Aenys had not. That power belonged to those strong enough to seize and hold it. Visenya, Maegor's mother, stood beside him at this coronation, having likely encouraged this very course of action. She had always been the harder of Aegon's two queens, and she had raised Maegor in her image. Where Aenys had inherited Rhaenys's gentleness, Maegor inherited Visenya's iron will and her willingness to use violence without hesitation. The Faith militant still controlled much of the realm, and young Aegon had fled to the Stormlands with his dragon. Civil war was inevitable, but Maegor welcomed it. He had not claimed the throne to negotiate. The war against the Faith militant was brief, brutal, and utterly one-sided once Maegor committed himself fully to its prosecution. He issued a proclamation that any man who abandoned the Faith militant before a certain date would be pardoned, but any who remained would be considered traitors and put to death. When the date passed, and thousands of warriors' sons and poor fellows remained in arms, Maegor kept his promise with terrifying efficiency. He flew Balerion across the realm, burning Faith militant strongholds and the castles of lords who harbored them. At the great Sept of Remembrance, where hundreds of warriors' sons had fortified themselves, Maegor ordered the doors barred from the outside and then had Balerion set the entire structure ablaze. The Sept burned for 3 days, and none emerged alive. The message was clear. The Faith could no longer hide behind holy vows. Other battles followed, each ending in overwhelming Targaryen victory, each adding to the growing toll of lives lost to dragonfire. Eventually, the Faith broke. The remaining warriors' sons surrendered, and the poor fellows melted back into the general population. The High Septon was forced to acknowledge Targaryen supremacy and dissolve the Faith Militant forever. Maegor had won through pure, uncompromising brutality. Maegor's personal life was as violent and troubled as his reign. He married 6 times, desperately seeking a son to continue his line, but each marriage ended in tragedy or disappointment. His first wife, Cerys Hightower, remained barren throughout their marriage despite numerous maesters and prayers. His second wife, Alice Haraway, became pregnant, but gave birth to a malformed, stillborn child with twisted features, and Maegor had her and her entire family executed for supposed infidelity and witchcraft, an entire noble house extinguished on suspicion alone. His third wife died in childbirth along with her deformed infant. His fourth, fifth, and sixth wives met similarly grim fates, dead in childbed, dead from illness, dead from circumstances never quite explained. Some whispered that Maegor himself was cursed, unable to father healthy children, perhaps punished by the gods for his cruelty and for his multiple marriages. Others suggested darker possibilities, that Maegor himself eliminated wives who failed to produce an heir. Whatever the truth, Maegor died without legitimate issue, his desperate pursuit of dynasty unfulfilled. The throne he had seized with such violence would pass into his nephew after all. The construction of the Red Keep stands as perhaps Maegor's most lasting achievement and his most chilling act of paranoia. The fortress had been begun under Aegon, but was completed under Maegor's direction, with all its secret passages, hidden corridors, and escape routes designed to protect the king from assassins. When the work was finally complete, Maegor ordered a great feast to celebrate, inviting all the builders, stonemasons, and craftsmen who had labored on the project. They came gladly, expecting reward for years of service. Instead, once they were gathered and the wine had flowed, Maegor had every single one of them put to death. Hundreds of men lost their lives that night, silenced forever so that the Red Keep's secrets would die with them. No one outside the royal family would know where the hidden doors led, which walls were false, which stairs descended to secret chambers. It was an act of calculated cruelty, murdering men who had served faithfully, and it cemented Maegor's reputation as utterly ruthless. The Red Keep's stones were laid in craftsmanship but mortared with blood, and whispers claim that the ghosts of those murdered builders still walk its hidden passages at night. In 48 AC, 6 years into his reign, Maegor Targaryen was found dead upon the Iron Throne, his wrists slashed and bleeding, multiple wounds covering his body where the throne's blades had cut him. The circumstances of his death remain one of Westeros's great mysteries. Some say he took his own life in despair, having lost everything: his wives, his potential heirs, the love of his subjects, even his mother Visenya, who had died the year before. Others claim he was assassinated, perhaps by members of his own Kingsguard who could no longer stomach his cruelty. Still others whisper that the Iron Throne itself rejected him, that the swords forged by his father sensed an usurper and kinslayer and dealt their own justice. The throne's blades seemed to have multiplied their cuts that morning, as if they had writhed and stabbed of their own accord. No one witnessed his final moments, and those who might have known the truth kept silent. Maegor died as he had lived, surrounded by blood and mystery, feared rather than mourned, leaving behind a kingdom held together by terror and a throne stained with the blood of an unloved king. Maegor's legacy was complex and dark. He had saved the Targaryen dynasty when it teetered on the edge of collapse, crushing the faith-militant rebellion that might otherwise have destroyed dragon rule. He had proven that the Targaryens could not be challenged, that their power was absolute, that rebellion meant death. In that sense, he succeeded where Aenys had failed. He made the realm fear the crown again. But the cost was tremendous. Thousands died in his wars, hundreds more in his paranoid purges, and his cruelty earned him a place in history as one of the most hated kings ever to sit the Iron Throne. The small folk called him Maegor the Cruel, a name that would echo through history, forever linked with tyranny and bloodshed. He was necessary, perhaps, in the way that brutal medicine is sometimes necessary to cure disease, but no one could love him. When news of his death spread, there were no tears except perhaps from enemies who had hoped to kill him themselves and been denied that satisfaction. The throne passed to Aenys' son Jaehaerys, and the realm breathed a collective sigh of relief. Yet, for all his cruelty, Maegor had established an important precedent, that the Targaryen dynasty would do whatever necessary to survive. Future kings would remember this lesson. Some would reject Maegor's methods and seek to rule with wisdom and justice. Others would embrace his ruthlessness when circumstances demanded. But none could ignore that Maegor had faced the greatest internal threat the dynasty ever encountered and crushed it absolutely. The faith would never again raise armies against the crown. The lords would think twice before rebellion. The small folk would remember what happened to those who defied dragons. Maegor paid for this security with his soul and his sanity, dying alone and bleeding on a throne that seemed to reject him. But the dynasty survived, and that survival was built on foundations of fire, blood, and iron. The three things Maegor understood better than love. When Jaehaerys Targaryen claimed the throne at 14 years old, he inherited a kingdom traumatized by his uncle's cruelty and exhausted from years of conflict. The realm expected little from this boy king who had spent much of his youth in hiding, fleeing from castle to castle, while Maegor hunted his family. But Jaehaerys possessed a quality neither his father Aenys nor his uncle Maegor had understood: the ability to balance strength with mercy, justice with pragmatism, tradition with innovation. Where Aenys had been too soft and Maegor too hard, Jaehaerys found the middle path. His first acts as king demonstrated this wisdom. He pardoned most of those who had served Maegor, recognizing that punishing thousands would only breed resentment. He recalled exiles and restored lands to families Maegor had dispossessed. He traveled the realm on dragonback, showing himself to the people, listening to their grievances, and promising better days. The small folk, so long terrorized, began to hope again. Lords who had contemplated rebellion decided to wait and see what this young king might accomplish. Even the faith, though wary, sensed an opportunity for peace. Jaehaerys would reign for 55 years, longer than any Targaryen before or after, and transform Westeros from a conquered territory into a unified kingdom. The question of the faith remained Jaehaerys' first great challenge, for though Maegor had crushed the faith militant, the underlying tension between crown and sept had never been resolved. The faith still viewed Targaryen sibling marriage as an abomination, and Jaehaerys had already married his sister Alysanne, continuing the tradition that had sparked so much bloodshed under Aenys. Rather than forcing submission through dragonfire as Maegor had done, Jaehaerys pursued a diplomatic solution. He met with the High Septon and proposed what would become known as the doctrine of exceptionalism. a theological compromise that acknowledged Targaryens as fundamentally different from other men. The doctrine stated that the gods had made Targaryens exceptional, closer to gods than to common mortals, and therefore the normal laws against incest did not apply to them. It was elegant sophistry, allowing the faith to maintain its moral authority over the general population while giving the Targaryens special dispensation. The High Septon, eager to end decades of conflict, agreed. In exchange, Jaehaerys confirmed the faith's privileges, built new septs, and showed great public piety. The compact held for the rest of his reign and beyond, finally resolving the religious crisis that had nearly destroyed the dynasty. Jaehaerys's Queen Alysanne was not merely his sister and wife, but his true partner in governance, a woman whose intelligence and compassion matched his own wisdom. Together, they traveled the realm constantly, never staying in King's Landing for too long, always showing themselves to the people. Alysanne had a particular gift for understanding the needs of women and the small folk, populations often ignored by lords and kings. She championed laws protecting women from abuse, established the right of widows to inherit property, and pushed for better treatment of orphans. Where Jaehaerys focused on roads and laws and administration, Alysanne focused on people and their daily struggles. The small folk adored her, calling her Good Queen Alysanne, and her influence on Jaehaerys's policies was profound. They were rarely apart throughout their long marriage, their love genuine and deep despite beginning as a political necessity. Together they had 13 children, though tragedy would claim too many of them. Their partnership became the model for what Targaryen rule could be at its best. Strength tempered by compassion, tradition balanced with progress, power wielded for the benefit of all rather than the glory of the few. Among Jaehaerys's most visible achievements were the great roads that still bear his name centuries later. Before his reign, travel between the kingdoms was difficult and dangerous, with paths more suited to horses than to wagons, vulnerable to bandits, and often impassable in winter. Jaehaerys envisioned a network of wide, well-maintained roads connecting all the great cities and castles of Westeros, allowing for trade, communication, and the rapid movement of armies when necessary. The grandest of these was the King's Road, running from Storm's End in the south through King's Landing and continuing north all the way to the Wall, a distance of thousands of miles. The construction took decades and employed thousands of workers, but when complete, the King's Road transformed Westeros. Merchants could move goods safely from one end of the realm to the other. News that once took weeks to travel could arrive in days. In times of war, armies could march with unprecedented speed. The roads also served a symbolic purpose, physical proof that the Seven Kingdoms were truly one kingdom now, stitched together by stone and mortar. Jaehaerys understood that conquest alone could not unify Westeros. Practical infrastructure that made people's lives better would do more than all the dragons ever could. Alysanne's journey to the north stands as one of the most remarkable royal visits in Westerosi history, demonstrating both her courage and her genuine concern for even the most distant subjects. In 58 AC, while Jaehaerys was occupied with matters in the south, Alysanne mounted her dragon Silverwing and flew north, visiting Winterfell and the Wall itself. No Targaryen queen had ever ventured so far north before. At Winterfell, Lord Stark welcomed her with northern hospitality, and Alysanne charmed the notoriously proud Northmen with her kindness and lack of southern airs. But her true destination was the Wall, that massive structure of ice stretching across the world's northern border. She flew Silverwing over the wall and landed at Castle Black, where the men of the Night's Watch stood in awe of the Queen and her dragon. Alysanne listened to the Watch describe their struggles: inadequate supplies, dwindling numbers, castles falling into ruin. She was horrified that the realm's first line of defense against whatever darkness lay beyond the wall was so neglected. Upon returning south, she convinced Jaehaerys to grant the Night's Watch significant new lands and incomes. A gate in the wall was named Queen's Gate in her honor, though it has long since been sealed with ice. Her visit reminded the realm that even the coldest, most distant corners mattered to the crown. The tragedies that befell Jaehaerys and Alysanne's children cast a long shadow over their otherwise glorious reign, a reminder that even dragon kings could not protect their loved ones from fate's cruelty. Of their 13 children, only 3 would survive to old age. The first great loss came when their eldest sons, Princes Aemon and Baelin, grew to manhood, promising heirs, both brave and wise. Aemon, the elder, should have inherited the throne, but he was killed by a Myrish crossbow bolt while fighting pirates in Tarth. His death devastated Jaehaerys, who had groomed Aemon for kingship and loved him dearly. Baelin then became heir, but he too would die before his father, succumbing to a burst belly in 101 AC. Other children were lost to illness, to childbirth complications, to accidents that no amount of power or wealth could prevent. Princess Daenerys, barely a year old, perished from illness. Princess Visera died after falling from a horse while drunk. Princess Alyssa died in childbirth. With each death, Jaehaerys and Alysanne aged beyond their years, grief etching lines into their faces, stealing the joy from their eyes. By the end of Jaehaerys' reign, the vibrant couple who had once traveled the realm together were shadows of themselves, haunted by empty rooms and memories of children who should have outlived them. The Great Council of 101 AC would prove to be one of Jaehaerys' most consequential decisions, though its full implications would not be understood for generations. After Prince Baelon's death, the succession became uncertain. Baelon's son Viserys had a claim, being the old king's grandson through the male line. But Princess Rhaenys, daughter of the deceased Prince Aemon, also had a claim. She was the child of Jaehaerys' eldest son, making her arguably the rightful heir. To avoid another succession war like those that had plagued earlier reigns, Jaehaerys called the Great Council, summoning lords from across the realm to Harrenhal to decide the succession through consensus rather than force. Hundreds of lords attended, debating for weeks. In the end, they chose Viserys over Rhaenys, establishing a precedent that male heirs would be preferred over female heirs, even when the female had a technically stronger claim. Rhaenys was passed over, earning the bitter nickname the Queen Who Never Was. At the time, this seemed like a wise compromise that avoided civil war. But the precedent set at the Great Council would haunt the dynasty decades later, when another Rhaenys, or rather another Rhaenyra, would have her claim challenged on the basis of her sex, plunging the realm into the devastating conflict known as the Dance of the Dragons. Jaehaerys' administrative reforms transformed the crown's ability to govern effectively, creating institutions and systems that would outlast his reign. He established the first unified code of laws applicable across all 7 kingdoms, ending the confusion of each region following its own customs and precedents. He reformed the royal treasury, bringing professionalism and accountability to crown finances that had previously been managed haphazardly. He expanded the role of the Hand of the King, delegating authority while maintaining oversight, allowing the kingdom to function smoothly even when the king could not personally attend to every matter. He created the office of Lord Commander of the City Watch in King's Landing, professionalizing the capital's law enforcement. He improved the system of maesters, ensuring that every castle had access to education and communication. These reforms were not dramatic or exciting. No one would sing songs about tax collection or legal codes, but they were the foundation of effective governance. Jaehaerys understood that maintaining a kingdom was harder than conquering one, and that peace required constant work, careful administration, and attention to detail that glory-seeking warriors found tedious. His reign proved that dragons made fine weapons but poor governors. Wisdom and patient labor built lasting peace. The latter years of Jaehaerys' reign were marked by increasing melancholy and withdrawal, as the accumulated weight of loss and age finally overwhelmed even his legendary strength. After Alysanne's death in 100 AC, Jaehaerys seemed to lose his anchor to the world. They had been married for over 60 years, partners in everything, and without her, he drifted. He became forgetful, sometimes confusing his living grandchildren with his dead children, calling them by the wrong names. He spent hours in his chambers, staring at nothing, or wandering the Red Keep's gardens as if searching for something he had lost. The small council took on more responsibility as the king's attention wandered. He was not mad in the way future Targaryens would be mad. There was no cruelty or paranoia, but rather a deep exhaustion, a sense that he had lived too long and seen too much sorrow. When he finally died in 103 AC at the age of 69, it came as a mercy. He had outlived his wife, outlived most of his children, outlived many of his friends and servants. The realm mourned him genuinely, for he had given them 55 years of peace and prosperity. But there was also a sense that he had earned his rest after carrying the crown's burden for so long. Jaehaerys' legacy was secure as the greatest Targaryen king, the standard by which all his successors would be measured and found wanting. He had taken a kingdom fractured by Maegor's cruelty and healed it. He had reconciled with the faith, built roads and institutions, established laws, and given the small folk safety and prosperity they had never known. He proved that Targaryens could be more than conquerors and tyrants, that they could be wise and just rulers who improved the realm rather than merely dominating it. Every king who came after would invoke his name when they wanted to claim legitimacy or wisdom. What would Jaehaerys have done? Became a common question in council chambers. His reign represented the high point of Targaryen rule, the moment when everything seemed possible and the dynasty seemed eternal. But even Jaehaerys could not solve all problems. The succession issue he tried to settle with the Great Council would resurface. The dragons that had been so numerous in his youth were already declining. The seeds of future conflicts were planted even during his golden age. Still, for 55 years, Westeros knew peace and good governance under the Conciliator, and that achievement alone secured his place in history as the greatest of the Dragon Kings. The contrast between Jaehaerys and his predecessors could not be more stark. Aegon had conquered through fire, establishing Targaryen rule through force. Aenys had nearly lost it through weakness, unable to impose his will even with dragons. Maegor had saved it through terror, crushing opposition with such brutality that his own reign became unsustainable. But Jaehaerys had truly secured it, not through conquest or fear, but through competence, compassion, and the patient work of good governance. He showed that the Targaryens could transcend their origins as foreign conquerors and become true kings of Westeros, ruling for the benefit of their subjects rather than their own glory. This was his gift to the dynasty, proof that they could be loved as well as feared, that dragons could protect rather than merely destroy. Whether his descendants would learn this lesson remained to be seen, but for one long, golden reign, the promise of what Targaryen rule could be was fulfilled in the person of Jaehaerys the Conciliator, the Old King, the greatest monarch the Seven Kingdoms would ever know. When the Great Council of 101 AC chose Viserys over his cousin Rhaenys, it seemed a clear resolution to a potentially explosive succession crisis. Viserys was Jaehaerys' grandson through Prince Baelon, a man grown with experience at court, well-liked by the lords, and seemingly capable of continuing his grandfather's peaceful reign. The early years of his rule justified this optimism. Viserys inherited a wealthy, stable kingdom, the treasury full, the realm at peace, and 9 dragons still alive, a number that would seem impossible just decades later. He was not a warrior king like Aegon the Conqueror, nor a brilliant administrator like Jaehaerys, but he was kind, generous, and genuinely desired the happiness of his subjects. The small folk called him Viserys the Peaceful, and for much of his reign that peace held. But Viserys possessed a fatal flaw that would cost the realm dearly. He could not, or would not, confront difficult choices even when delay made them catastrophic. He wanted everyone to be happy, every faction satisfied, every conflict resolved without confrontation. This desire for universal contentment would be his undoing and the realm's tragedy. The first great decision of Viserys' reign came after the death of his beloved wife Aemma Arryn, who perished in childbirth along with the son she tried to deliver. Grief-stricken and left with only one surviving child, his daughter Rhaenyra, Viserys faced tremendous pressure to remarry and produce a male heir. His hand, Otto Hightower, suggested his own daughter Alicent, a beautiful young woman who had been Rhaenyra's close friend and had comforted Viserys in his grief. The match was politically useful, binding the powerful Hightower family more closely to the crown, but it would prove catastrophic. Alicent was considerably younger than Viserys, young enough that some considered the marriage inappropriate, and Rhaenyra felt betrayed by her friend's marriage to her father. More importantly, before the marriage, Viserys had named Rhaenyra his heir, and the lords of Westeros had sworn oaths to uphold her succession. But once Alicent began bearing Viserys' sons, first Aegon, then Aemond, then Daeron, the question became inevitable. Why should a daughter inherit when legitimate sons existed? Viserys never revoked Rhaenyra's status as heir, but he also never truly prepared the realm for a ruling queen, creating an ambiguity that would split the kingdom in two. The Red Keep gradually divided into 2 factions, though the split happened slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, like a crack forming in marble that starts small but eventually shatters the whole structure. On one side were Rhaenyra and her supporters, wearing black in honor of House Targaryen's colors. They became known as the Blacks. They believed in Viserys' original decree, the oaths sworn by the lords, and Rhaenyra's right to inherit as the king's named heir regardless of her sex. On the other side were Queen Alicent and her supporters, wearing green as the Hightowers did. They became the Greens. They argued that Westerosi tradition and the precedent set by the Great Council made Aegon, as the eldest son, the rightful heir. Both sides claimed legitimacy. Both sides believed themselves in the right. And between them stood Viserys, increasingly frail and sick, unable or unwilling to definitively resolve the contradiction he had created. He loved all his children and could not bear to choose between them. He wanted Rhaenyra to succeed, but also wanted his sons to feel valued. This inability to make a hard choice would be his greatest failure as king. Viserys's health deteriorated slowly over the years, his body consumed by some wasting illness that the Maesters could neither diagnose nor cure. It began with small cuts that would not heal properly, wounds that festered despite treatment. Gradually, the disease spread, affecting larger portions of his body. His face became drawn and pale. His body weakened until he could barely walk without assistance. Parts of his flesh seemed to rot while he still lived, requiring amputation of fingers and eventually his entire left arm. The Maesters gave him milk of the poppy for the pain, which clouded his mind and made him even less capable of the decisive action the realm needed. He spent increasing time in his chambers, attended by Maesters and servants, drifting in and out of consciousness, while the court factions maneuvered around his sickbed. The Iron Throne cut him frequently during his rare appearances in court, as if the throne itself sensed weakness. Through it all, Viserys clung to the delusion that his family loved each other, that Rhaenyra and Alicent could reconcile, that his children would not turn on each other after his death. He died believing in a peace that existed only in his failing mind. The final years of Viserys's reign were marked by an incident that should have shattered any remaining illusions about family unity, though the king somehow continued to ignore reality even then. At a court function, Prince Aemond, Alicent's second son, called Rhaenyra's children bastards, a grave insult because everyone suspected it was true. Rhaenyra had married Laenor Velaryon, but her 3 eldest sons bore no resemblance to him and looked suspiciously like Sir Harwin Strong, the sworn shield she kept close. In the confrontation that followed, Aemond lost an eye, slashed by one of Rhaenyra's sons in the brawl. Alicent demanded justice, even drawing a knife and lunging at Rhaenyra herself before being restrained. The king should have addressed the truth everyone knew, that Rhaenyra's heirs were likely bastards with no true claim. Instead, Viserys threatened anyone who questioned the boy's legitimacy, declaring that tongues would be removed for such slanders. He chose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths, protecting his daughter while infuriating Alicent and her faction. The Greens learned that night that Viserys would never choose them over Rhaenyra, no matter what. The Blacks learned they could act with impunity. The divide became unbridgeable. When Viserys finally died in 129 AC, his passing was kept secret for hours while the Greens moved to secure the throne for Aegon. The small council, dominated by Green supporters, acted swiftly. They sealed the Red Keep, arrested potential Black supporters, and sent riders to secure key locations before word of the king's death could spread. When they finally announced Viserys's passing, it was accompanied immediately by the proclamation of Aegon II as king, despite Viserys's standing decree that Rhaenyra should inherit. The Greens claimed that Viserys had changed his mind on his deathbed, calling for Aegon, though only Queen Alicent claimed to have heard these words, and she was alone with him at the time. Whether this was truth or convenient fiction, none could say. What mattered was that the Greens had moved first, seizing the initiative. By the time Rhaenyra learned of her father's death at Dragonstone, her half-brother had already been crowned in the Sept of Baelor before thousands of witnesses. The die was cast. War was inevitable. Viserys's legacy was one of peace purchased at the cost of future catastrophe. His reign had indeed been peaceful. No wars, no major rebellions, years of prosperity and calm. But this peace was built on unresolved contradictions, on difficult decisions deferred rather than made, on conflicts papered over rather than settled. He had named Rhaenyra heir, but never prepared the realm to accept a queen. He had fathered sons, but never clarified their place in succession. He had allowed two factions to form at court, but never forced reconciliation. He had seen the growing divide, but hoped love would overcome politics. In trying to please everyone, he had satisfied no one. His desire to be loved, to avoid a confrontation, to maintain the illusion of family harmony, had made civil war inevitable. The Dance of the Dragons would be his true legacy, one of the most devastating conflicts in Westerosi history. A war that would kill tens of thousands, destroy most of the dragons, and permanently weaken the Targaryen dynasty. All because a kind king could not make hard choices, believing until his dying day that somehow everything would work out if only everyone would be reasonable. The realm would pay in blood for Viserys' gentleness. The great tragedy of Viserys was that he genuinely loved all his children and wanted them all to thrive, never understanding that this love could not prevent their ambitions from destroying each other. He loved Rhaenyra, his bright daughter who he saw so much of her mother in. He loved Aegon, Aemond, and Daeron, his sons who carried his blood and his name. In his mind, they could coexist peacefully. Rhaenyra would rule, and her brothers would serve her loyally as great lords and counselors. This vision required everyone to act against their self-interest and ambition, to ignore the realities of power and succession that had driven conflicts for centuries. It required Alicent to accept her sons being passed over. It required the lords to accept a precedent that contradicted their understanding of how succession worked. It required Aegon to reject a crown that tradition said was his. Viserys' love was real, but love alone could not rewrite the laws of power and ambition. When he died, that love died with him, and what remained was ambition, fear, pride, and the terrible momentum toward war that no one could stop. When Aegon II was crowned king in the dragon pit of King's Landing, he did not particularly want the throne, at least not initially. He was a drunken, dissolute young man who preferred pleasure to politics, whores to council meetings, and wine to responsibility. But Queen Alicent and the Green Council gave him no choice, arguing that Rhaenyra would kill him and his brothers if she took power, that his very existence threatened her reign, that he must take the crown to save his family. Whether this fear was justified or merely a convenient justification for ambition, none can say with certainty. What is certain is that once crowned, Aegon embraced his role, developing genuine determination to hold what he now considered his by right. The coronation itself was a propaganda triumph. Thousands witnessed it, and Aegon looked every inch a king in his golden crown and armor. But across the water at Dragonstone, Rhaenyra was crowned by her own supporters, and she too had dragons, lords, and armies. The realm now had two monarchs, and only dragonfire would determine which claim would prevail. The war began with strategic maneuvering rather than immediate battle, each side seeking to secure allies, resources, and advantageous positions before the killing started in earnest. The realm divided roughly in half. The north, the Vale, and the Riverlands declared for Rhaenyra, honoring the oaths their fathers had sworn to Viserys. The Westerlands, the Reach, and the Stormlands largely supported Aegon, following their lord's decisions and traditional views on succession. The outcome was far from certain. Rhaenyra had more dragons initially, but Aegon held the capital and the treasury. Both sides sent ravens seeking support, made promises of lands and titles, and prepared for the struggle they knew was coming. The first blood was shed not in glorious battle but in murders and assassinations, as each side eliminated the other's supporters where they could. Lords were killed in their beds, envoys were ambushed on roads, and families were torn apart as members chose different sides. The dance had begun not with a roar, but with whispers and blades in the dark. One of the most horrific acts of the entire war occurred early in the conflict, an act of revenge so terrible that it shocked even those accustomed to violence and set the tone for the atrocities to come. Prince Lucerys Valerian, Rhaenyra's son, had been sent as an envoy to Storm's End to secure the Baratheon allegiance. There he encountered Prince Aemond, Aegon's brother, who had never forgiven Lucerys for the childhood incident that cost him his eye. Despite the sacred laws of hospitality and envoy protection, Aemond pursued Lucerys when he left on his dragon. Above storms, and in a storm-racked sky, Aemond's massive dragon Vhagar attacked and killed Lucerys' smaller dragon, sending both rider and mount plummeting into the sea below. Rhaenyra received her son's body washed up on shore days later. Mad with grief and rage, she demanded vengeance. What followed was known as Blood and Cheese, an operation where two men infiltrated the Red Keep and confronted Queen Helaena, Aegon's sister wife, forcing a terrible choice upon her before taking the life of her young son. The act was meant to mirror Rhaenyra's loss, a son for a son. It was monstrously cruel, achieved nothing strategic, and hardened both sides against any possibility of peace. From that point forward, the dance was not merely a succession dispute, but a blood feud that would only end when one side was destroyed. The Battle of Rook's Rest proved to be the first major dragon confrontation, and it left King Aegon II gravely wounded, removing him from active command for much of the war. Rhaenyra's forces had been raiding in the Crown Lands, and Aegon, eager to prove his courage and martial prowess, flew on his dragon Sunfire to confront them. His brother Aemond accompanied him on Vhagar. They encountered Rhaenyra's dragon and its rider, and in the sky above Rook's Rest, Dragonfire met Dragonfire in a terrible aerial battle. Dragons screamed and clawed at each other. Fire illuminated the clouds, and below, armies watched in awe and horror. When it ended, Rhaenyra's dragon and rider had fallen, dead on impact. But Aegon's dragon Sunfire was terribly wounded, and Aegon himself was broken, burned, his armor melted to his flesh in places, bones shattered, one leg crushed beyond healing. He survived only because Maesters worked frantically to save him, but he would never be whole again. For months he lay in agony, fed milk of the poppy, while his brother Aemond and the small council ruled in his name. The king had proven his courage but lost his ability to lead. The death of dragons became the defining tragedy of the dance, a loss that would cripple House Targaryen's power permanently. Before the war, nearly 20 dragons lived, from ancient beasts like Vhagar to young hatchlings barely large enough to ride. The Targaryens' strength had always rested on these creatures. Without dragons, they were merely another noble house with delusions of grandeur. The dance consumed dragons with terrible efficiency. They died in battle against each other, torn apart by claws and teeth, burned by each other's fire. They died to scorpion bolts shot from the ground by desperate defenders. They died in ambushes and riots. They died protecting riders who fell to arrows and swords. Dragon fought dragon over Harrenhal, over the God's Eye, over King's Landing itself. Vhagar, the last of Aegon the Conqueror's dragons, perished locked in combat with another dragon, both crashing into a lake and sinking together. Sea Smoke, Vermax, Melees, Moondancer, names that had echoed through Targaryen history fell silent one by one. By the war's end, only 4 dragons remained alive, and 3 of those were small, wild, or untamed. The Age of Dragons was ending, killed not by time but by Targaryen fighting Targaryen. As the war dragged on, both sides grew more desperate and brutal, abandoning any pretense of honor or restraint in their determination to win. Cities were sacked, castles burned, and civilians died by the thousands. Tumbleton was betrayed and sacked twice, with dragonfire consuming much of the town each time. The Riverlands became a wasteland as armies marched back and forth, living off the land and leaving starvation in their wake. Winter came, and with food stores depleted by war, small folk died of cold and hunger. Neither Rhaenyra nor Aegon could claim moral superiority. Both sides committed atrocities, both employed men known for cruelty, both sacrificed honor for advantage. The lords who fought mostly cared about their own advancement, switching sides when convenient, pursuing old grudges while claiming loyalty to one crown or another. The war that began as a dispute over succession transformed into something uglier, a conflict that revealed the worst of humanity and destroyed the very kingdom both sides claimed to fight for. Rhaenyra's brief occupation of King's Landing proved to be the high point of her campaign and the beginning of her downfall, demonstrating that winning a throne and holding it required different skills. After Aegon fled the capital with his wounded dragon, Rhaenyra entered King's Landing in triumph, sitting the Iron Throne she had been promised since childhood. But her reign was disastrous almost immediately. The treasury was empty, the city was hostile, and her attempts to raise money through taxes and confiscations alienated the population. She grew paranoid and harsh, ordering executions of suspected traitors, imprisoning former Green supporters, and generally ruling through fear. The small folk, who had no love for either faction, began to hate her specifically. When riots erupted, Rhaenyra's response was brutal, and more lives were lost in the violence. Meanwhile, Aegon had escaped and was gathering support, while his brother Aemond commanded armies in the field. Rhaenyra had achieved her dream of sitting the Iron Throne, but she held a poisoned chalice, a crown that brought no power, no security, only mounting danger as her enemies closed in. The end came for Rhaenyra at Dragonstone, the ancient Targaryen fortress that should have been her sanctuary, but became her tomb. Betrayed by her own lords and with her forces scattered, Rhaenyra fled King's Landing and returned to Dragonstone. But Aegon had sent ships and men to take the island fortress, and when Rhaenyra arrived, she found her enemies waiting. She was captured, along with her young son, Aegon the Younger, and brought before King Aegon II, who had been transported to Dragonstone despite his injuries. What happened next would haunt her son for the rest of his life. Aegon II, filled with hatred for the woman who had contested his crown and caused so much death, ordered Rhaenyra fed to his wounded dragon Sunfire. The dragon, starving and in pain, devoured her while her son watched, forced to witness his mother's death in the most horrific manner imaginable. It was an act of pure cruelty, motivated by vengeance rather than justice or strategy. Rhaenyra Targaryen, the first woman to seriously contest for the Iron Throne, died screaming in dragonfire, her dream of queenship ending in nightmare. Yet Aegon II's victory was hollow and short-lived, for he had won a crown over a ruined kingdom and would not wear it long. The war continued even after Rhaenyra's death, her remaining supporters fighting on in her name or in support of her son. Aegon found himself ruling over ashes and debt, his body broken, his brother Aemond dead in battle, his dragon wounded beyond recovery, his capital restless, and his former allies grown weary or treacherous. In 131 AC, just months after Rhaenyra's death, Aegon II himself perished. Poisoned, it was whispered, by members of his own council who had grown tired of war and sought peace with the Blacks by eliminating the king who stood in its way. He was found dead in his chambers, his wine cup beside him, and whether he was assassinated or took his own life, none could say with certainty. He had won the throne he claimed, had eliminated his rival, but held it for less than 2 years, and died without ever truly securing his victory. The dance of the dragons ended not with triumph, but with exhaustion. Both claimants dead, the kingdom devastated, and a child placed on a throne neither side had truly won. The legacy of the dance was written in blood, ash, and the permanent weakening of House Targaryen. The war had killed tens of thousands, soldiers, small folk, nobles alike. It had destroyed most of the dragons, the very foundation of Targaryen power. It had bankrupted the crown, devastated entire regions, and shattered the illusion of Targaryen invincibility. The lords had learned that Targaryens could be resisted, that dragons could be killed, that the crown was vulnerable. More importantly, the dance proved that the greatest threat to House Targaryen was not external enemies, but internal division, that Targaryen fighting Targaryen was the surest path to mutual destruction. The scars of the war would never fully heal. Families that fought on opposite sides remained bitter enemies for generations. The loss of dragons meant the Targaryens would henceforth rule as mortal kings, not godlike dragon lords. And the succession crisis that sparked the war, whether a woman could inherit, was resolved only through carnage, leaving no clear answer except that ambiguity was deadly. Both Aegon and Rhaenyra had legitimate claims, both had supporters with valid arguments, and both destroyed themselves and the realm fighting over a crown that proved worthless in the end. When Aegon III ascended to the Iron Throne at the age of 10, he was already broken by trauma no child should endure. His spirit crushed beneath the weight of horrors witnessed and loved ones lost. He had watched his mother Rhaenyra devoured by his uncle's dragon while he stood helpless, powerless to save her, the screams echoing in his mind forever after. He had survived the dance of the dragons while so many others perished, but survival felt less like salvation and more like punishment. The boy who became king was small, quiet, and profoundly sad, his eyes holding a darkness that spoke of things no amount of time could heal. He wore black constantly, both for House Targaryen and in perpetual mourning for everything the war had taken. The lords who crowned him hoped that youth would bring resilience, that time would heal his wounds, and he would grow into a strong king. They were wrong. Aegon III would never truly recover from what he had seen, and his reign would be colored by the melancholy that settled over him like a shroud from which he never emerged. Because Aegon was only 10 years old when crowned, his early reign was dominated by regents, lords who ruled in his name while he remained a child. These regencies were contentious and often corrupt, as various factions maneuvered for power and influence over the young king. The hand of the king changed multiple times, each appointment representing a shift in which faction controlled the council. Some regents were competent and well-meaning, genuinely trying to rebuild a kingdom devastated by civil war. Others were venal and self-serving, using their positions to enrich themselves and settle old scores. Aegon sat silently through council meetings, signing documents when told to, speaking little, his face an expressionless mask that revealed nothing of his thoughts. He was the king in name, but others wielded the actual power while he drifted through his days like a ghost haunting the Red Keep. The lords learned that they could not read him, could not predict his desires or manipulate him through flattery or fear. This was not because Aegon was clever or politically astute, but because he seemed to care about nothing at all, hollowed out by grief and trauma. The last dragon died during Aegon III's reign, an event so symbolically significant that it marked the end of an era and earned him the bitter epithet Dragonbane. The dragon was small and sickly, one of the few that had survived the dance, kept in the dragon pit and tended by dragon keepers who hoped it might recover and breed. But it grew weaker rather than stronger, refusing food, its scales losing their luster, its fire guttering out. In 153 AC, the last dragon finally perished, and with its death, the Age of Dragons ended. The Targaryens had always drawn their power from these creatures. Without dragons, they were reduced to simply another royal house, distinguished only by silver hair and old glory. Some blamed Aegon for this, claiming his presence somehow poisoned the dragons, his melancholy infecting even the beasts that had once ruled the skies. The nickname Dragonbane was cruel and unfair. Aegon had not killed the dragons, the dance had done that. But it stuck nonetheless. He became associated with decline and loss, the king who presided over the extinction of the creatures that made his house great. Multiple attempts were made throughout Aegon's reign to bring dragons back, each more desperate than the last, but all ended in failure or tragedy. Meisters consulted ancient texts from Valyria, trying to uncover the secrets of dragon breeding that had been lost in the Doom. Sorcerers from Ashai were brought to King's Landing at great expense, promising rituals that could hatch dragon eggs. Dragon eggs were placed in fires of increasing intensity, subjected to blood sacrifice, and exposed to various magical ceremonies that achieved nothing except waste and occasionally death when experiments went catastrophically wrong. Some theorized that only Targaryen blood could hatch dragons, leading to dangerous experiments that Aegon quietly forbade after hearing whispers of what was being proposed. Nothing worked. The eggs remained stone. The dragons stayed dead. And each failure reinforced the growing understanding that the Age of Dragons was truly over. The Targaryens would have to learn to rule as mortal kings, without the terrible power that had made them different from other men. Aegon's marriage to Rhaenyra Velaryon was a political arrangement meant to reconcile the former Black and Green factions, binding their houses together in the hope of healing old wounds. Rhaenyra was young, beautiful, and by all accounts sweet-tempered, exactly the sort of queen who might have brought joy and life back to the grieving king. But Aegon remained distant from her, fulfilling his duties to produce heirs, but offering no warmth or affection. He was not cruel to her. Cruelty would have required emotion, and Aegon had none to spare. He was simply absent, present in body but unreachable in spirit, going through the motions of marriage without ever truly connecting with his wife. They had children together, ensuring the succession, but these were obligations completed rather than joys celebrated. Rhaenyra tried at first to reach him, to coax smiles or conversation, but eventually she learned that the king was lost somewhere inside himself, trapped in memories of fire and death that he could not escape. She accepted this distance with grace, ruling the household while Aegon ruled nothing, not even himself. The one thing that seemed to give Aegon any sense of purpose was administration and the mundane work of governance, though even this was pursued with mechanical efficiency rather than passion. As he grew older and the regencies ended, Aegon took control of the actual business of kingship, reviewing petitions, settling legal disputes, overseeing the rebuilding of the realm's infrastructure damaged in the dance. He was methodical and fair in his judgments, paying careful attention to details that more charismatic kings would have delegated. The small folk appreciated this diligence, finding that the melancholy king rendered justice without favoritism or corruption. But there was no joy in it for Aegon, no satisfaction in a job well done. He worked because work filled the hours, because it was expected, because idle time meant memories had space to surface. His reign brought stability and slow recovery from the devastation of civil war, but it was a gray, joyless stability. Peace without happiness, order without hope. The kingdom functioned, but no one would call these years glorious or memorable except as a time of slow, grinding recovery. Aegon III never smiled after the dance of the dragons ended, or so the histories claim. Whether literally true or poetic exaggeration, it captured an essential truth about this broken king. Lords and courtiers grew accustomed to his expressionless face, his monotone voice, his lack of reaction to either good news or bad. He attended feasts without eating much, sat through tournaments without showing interest in the contests, and received reports of births and deaths with the same flat acknowledgement. Some said he was brave, enduring the crown's burden despite his inner torment. Others called him weak, unable to overcome childhood trauma. But perhaps he was simply honest, refusing to pretend joy he did not feel, declining to wear masks that other kings employed to hide their true selves. He had seen the worst of what humanity and dragons could do to each other, had watched his world burn, and he carried those scars visibly. There was something almost admirable in his refusal to pretend otherwise, in his stark presentation of grief that could not be buried or beautified. When Aegon III died in 157 AC, at the age of 36, his passing was mourned more from duty than from genuine grief, and there was a sense that death had finally released him from a life he had never wanted. He died of consumption, his body finally giving out after years of joyless existence. He left behind children to continue the dynasty, and a kingdom more stable than the one he had inherited, but no one remembered his reign with fondness. He was the broken king, the Dragonbane, the unlucky, a man who had survived when perhaps survival was the cruelest fate possible. His legacy was bound up with loss of his mother, loss of dragons, loss of the Targaryen mystique that had once made them seem more than mortal. Yet, in his quiet, damaged way, Aegon had held the realm together during its most vulnerable period, had prevented the complete collapse of Targaryen rule when it seemed impossible that a traumatized child could bear such weight. He deserved better than history gave him. Not glory, perhaps, but recognition that sometimes simply enduring is the hardest and bravest thing a person can do, and that Aegon III endured his entire reign carrying wounds that never healed. When Daeron the Fai took the throne at 14 years old, he was everything his father Aegon III had not been: bold, charismatic, filled with martial ambition and dreams of glory that the Dance of the Dragons had seemingly beaten out of the Targaryen bloodline. Where Aegon III had been quiet and withdrawn, Daeron was outgoing and confident. Where his father had worn black and mourned, Daeron wore bright colors and spoke of conquest. The court, so long accustomed to the Dragonbane's melancholy, was almost shocked by this young king who actually seemed to enjoy being alive. Daeron had grown up hearing stories of Aegon the Conqueror, of the great victories that had forged the Seven Kingdoms, and he yearned to achieve similar glory. He looked at the map of Westeros and saw one glaring failure that had persisted for nearly 2 centuries. Dorne remained independent, unconquered, a reminder that even the Targaryens had limits. Daeron decided he would succeed where his ancestors had failed, that he would be the king who finally brought Dorne into the realm. This ambition would define his brief reign and ultimately cost him his life. Daeron's invasion of Dorne in 157 AC was meticulously planned, the product of a year of preparation that involved gathering intelligence, securing allies, and assembling an army larger than any that had marched south since the conquest. Daeron had studied the failures of previous attempts to conquer Dorne, understanding that the Dornish fought differently than other Westerosi, that they would not meet him in open battle where superior numbers would prevail. His strategy was to move quickly, strike at multiple points simultaneously, and seize the major castles before the Dornish could organize effective resistance. The invasion began with stunning success. Daeron's forces swept into Dorne, capturing castles and defeating Dornish forces with remarkable efficiency. Within months, the young dragon had achieved what no king before him had managed. He held all the major Dornish strongholds and had forced the submission of the Dornish lords. At 14, Daeron had seemingly accomplished the impossible, and all of Westeros celebrated. He was the young dragon, the boy king who had triumphed where legendary warriors had failed. In the flush of victory, Daeron composed The Conquest of Dorne, a detailed account of his campaign that would become one of the most famous books in Westerosi history, studied by maesters and warriors alike for generations. The book was remarkable, not just for its historical content, but for its style. Daeron wrote with flair and confidence, describing battles and strategy with the eye of someone who had lived them. He detailed the terrain of Dorne, the tactics of his commanders, the key decisions that led to victory. The book made him a legend even in his own lifetime, confirming his image as a warrior king in the mold of Aegon the Conqueror. Young lords throughout Westeros dreamed of similar glory, of writing their own conquest narratives. But the book would ultimately serve as a monument to Daeron's naivety, for it described a conquest that proved to be an illusion. Holding Dorne required different skills than taking it, and Daeron had not understood this fundamental truth. The Dornish had not truly been conquered. They had merely retreated, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Within a year of Daeron's supposed victory, rebellion erupted across Dorne. The lords who had bent the knee rose up, their submissions having been tactical delays rather than genuine surrender. Guerrilla warfare consumed the occupation forces, with Dornish fighters attacking supply lines, ambushing patrols, and melting back into the deserts and mountains where conventional armies could not follow. The castles that Daeron had taken became traps, isolated strongholds that required massive garrisons to hold and which were constantly besieged by hostile populations. The costs of the occupation spiraled, in gold, in supplies, and in lives. What had seemed like a glorious conquest transformed into a grinding, expensive quagmire that drained the realm's resources and patience. Daeron found himself unable to pacify Dorne, unable to withdraw without admitting failure, trapped by his own success into an unsustainable position. In 161 AC, just 4 years after his conquest and 3 years into the rebellion, Daeron of Huors was killed in Dorne at the age of 18. He had led a force into the Dornish mountains to suppress yet another uprising, and there, in a narrow pass, his army was ambushed. The chronicles do not provide extensive details of the battle, but the outcome was clear. The young dragon fell, struck down by Dornish fighters who had grown expert at exactly this sort of warfare. His body was recovered and returned to King's Landing for burial, but his dream of Dorne died with him in those mountains. The garrisons were withdrawn shortly after, the occupation abandoned, and Dorne had remained independent as it had been before. Everything Daeron had fought for, all the lives spent on his conquest, had achieved nothing permanent. Dorne would eventually join the Seven Kingdoms, but it would be through marriage and diplomacy rather than conquest, a peaceful union that would have been possible without the bloodshed of Daeron's war. Daeron's legacy is one of the most debated in Targaryen history. Was he a brave warrior king cut down in his prime, or a reckless boy who wasted lives on an impossible dream? Those who admired him pointed to his courage, his ambition, his genuine military skill in achieving the initial conquest. He had proven himself in battle, had inspired loyalty in his men, and had attempted something that might have succeeded with more time or different circumstances. His Conquest of Dorne remained required reading at the Citadel, demonstrating genuine strategic insight. But his critics noted that courage without wisdom was simply recklessness, that his refusal to accept the reality of Dornish resistance had cost thousands of lives for no gain. He had achieved a tactical victory, but failed to understand the strategic impossibility of his goal. His reign lasted only 4 years, and his primary achievement was undone before his body was cold. The small folk paid the taxes to fund his war, and their sons died in Dornish sands for nothing. The tragedy of Daeron Fais was that he had died too young to learn from his mistakes, killed before he could mature into the wise king he might have become. At 14, he had been brilliant but naive, seeing warfare as glorious adventure rather than grim necessity. At 18, he was still learning the difference between winning battles and achieving lasting peace, between martial prowess and political wisdom. Had he survived Dorne, had he lived to 30 or 40, he might have learned these lessons and become a great king, rather than merely a promising one who died young. Instead, he became a cautionary tale about the dangers of youthful ambition unchecked by experience, about the difference between dreams and reality. His epitaph could read, "Here lies Daeron the young dragon, who won Dorne and lost it again, who dreamed of glory and found only death. The realm mourned his potential more than his actual achievements, grieving for the king he might have been rather than the boy he was." When Baelor inherited the throne from his brother Daeron, the contrast could not have been more stark. Where Daeron had been a warrior obsessed with conquest, Baelor was a holy man obsessed with the gods and the salvation of his soul. From childhood, Baelor had been extraordinarily pious, spending hours in prayer, fasting regularly, and showing more interest in the Seven than in governance or warfare. When Daeron died in Dorne, Baelor was with the army, having accompanied his brother south. One of his first acts as king was stunning in its symbolism and apparent foolishness. He decided to walk from Dorne back to King's Landing to make peace. traveling alone and barefoot through the Prince's Pass as a gesture of humility and contrition. The journey took weeks, his feet bleeding, his body growing thin from lack of food, but Baelor refused all offers of aid. When he finally reached King's Landing, his feet were wrapped in bloody bandages, but he claimed the suffering had brought him closer to the gods. This was the king Westeros would have to endure for the next decade. A man who valued holiness over practicality, martyrdom over competence. The rescue of his cousin Aemon the Dragon Knight from a pit of vipers became the defining legend of Baelor's early reign. An act of such apparent faith and courage that it seemed almost miraculous, though whether miracle or madness remained debatable. Aemon had been captured by the Dornish during the failed occupation, and as part of the peace negotiations, his release was demanded. But the Dornish, testing Baelor's commitment, placed Aemon in a pit filled with venomous serpents, and told Baelor that if he entered the pit unarmed and retrieved his cousin alive, they would consider it a sign from the gods and make peace. Baelor, without hesitation, climbed into the pit. The vipers struck at him repeatedly, their fangs sinking into his flesh, venom pumping into his blood. But Baelor continued praying, walking calmly through the writhing mass of serpents, and somehow, through faith, through luck, or through the snakes being less venomous than believed, he survived long enough to reach Aemon and help him from the pit. Both men collapsed afterward, fevered and hallucinating, but they lived. The Dornish, impressed or perhaps simply bewildered by such faith, agreed to peace. Baelor had succeeded in diplomacy where Daeron had failed in war, though at tremendous personal cost. Baelor's relationship with his own sister's wives revealed the extremity of his religious fervor and its consequences for those around him. Following Targaryen tradition, Baelor had been married to his sister Dana, with his other sisters Rhaena and Elena also married into the family. But Baelor found himself tormented by desires he considered sinful, unable to reconcile his flesh's wants with his soul's needs. His solution was drastic and cruel. He had his sisters confined to the Maiden Vault, a set of apartments in the Red Keep that became their prison. They were well cared for, provided with luxuries and servants, but they could not leave, could not marry others, could not live normal lives. Baelor claimed this protected them from sin and himself from temptation. But the reality was that he had imprisoned innocent women to manage his own struggles with desire. Dana, Rhaena, and Elena would spend years in this gilded cage, their lives wasted because their brother-husband could not control himself and chose imprisonment over personal discipline. It was one of the cruelest acts of Baelor's reign, done with pure intentions but causing genuine harm. The king's religious reforms grew increasingly extreme as his reign progressed, imposing his piety on a realm that did not necessarily share his fervor for self-denial and suffering. Baelor attempted to outlaw prostitution throughout the Seven Kingdoms, a move that was impossible to enforce and simply drove the practice underground. He tried to ban the brewing and sale of alcohol, sparking riots in King's Landing among small folk who depended on ale and wine. He pushed for laws against immodest dress, attempting to force women to cover themselves more completely. He elevated religious figures to positions of power based on their holiness rather than their competence, replacing a capable hand of the king with the High Septon, which proved disastrous for governance. The small council meetings became more like prayer sessions than administrative discussions. Lords found their petitions answered with scriptural quotes rather than practical solutions. The realm functioned despite the king rather than because of him, with competent administrators working around his increasingly erratic religious edicts. Baelor's fasting ultimately killed him, his pursuit of holiness taken to such extremes that his body simply could not endure. He had always fasted regularly as a form of spiritual discipline, but in his later years, these fasts grew longer and more severe. He would go weeks consuming only water and bread, then just water, seeking ever greater closeness to the divine through deprivation of the flesh. His body grew skeletal, his mind increasingly prone to visions and hallucinations that he interpreted as divine communication. Maesters and counselors begged him to eat, but Baelor insisted that the gods were testing him, that his suffering had purpose. In 171 AC, after a fast that had lasted for weeks, Baelor collapsed during a prayer session and never rose again. He died at the age of 43, starved to death by his own hand in the name of faith. His last words were reportedly prayers, asking the gods to forgive the realm its sins. He died believing he was righteous, never understanding that his extreme piety had harmed more than it helped. The legacy of Baelor the Blessed, later called Baelor the Befuddled by less charitable historians, remains deeply complicated, a study in how good intentions and genuine faith can produce terrible governance. He was sincere in his beliefs, genuinely trying to make the realm more holy, to bring people closer to the gods, to purify Westeros of sin. Unlike cruel kings who caused suffering through malice, Baelor caused it through excessive virtue, through taking good principles to destructive extremes. He did achieve some positive things. His walk to make peace with Dorne ended a costly war. His rescue of Aemon showed genuine courage, and his personal charity helped many poor. But he was fundamentally unsuited for kingship, unable to balance spiritual concerns with practical governance. The realm needed a king. Instead, it got a saint, and saints make poor administrators. After his death, the Sept of Baelor was built in his honor, but his successor immediately reversed most of his policies and released the sisters from the Maiden Vault. Baelor's reign taught the realm that a king needed more than virtue. He needed wisdom to know when virtue became vice. Viserys II's path to the throne was long and unlikely, making his eventual coronation feel almost like destiny reasserting itself after decades of waiting. He was the younger brother of Aegon III, overshadowed for most of his life by the Dragonbane's melancholy reign, and then by his nephew's brief kingships. But while kings came and went, Viserys served, first as a counselor to his brother, then as hand of the king under multiple monarchs, proving himself to be one of the most capable administrators the realm had seen since Jaehaerys the Conciliator. For years, Viserys was the true power behind the throne, managing the kingdom's finances, conducting diplomacy, and handling the daily business of governance while others wore the crown. He had learned patience in his youth when he was held hostage in Lys for years during the Dance of the Dragons, forced to witness slavery and cruelty that taught him both the value of freedom and the necessity of ruthless pragmatism. When he finally became king at age 49, he was more qualified for the role than any Targaryen in generations, having effectively ruled for decades without the crown. Viserys's actual reign lasted barely a year, from 171 to 172 AC, but in that short time he demonstrated the competence and efficiency that had characterized his decades of service as Hand. He reformed the royal treasury, which had grown chaotic under Baelor's religious reign. He restored practical administrators to positions that Baelor had filled with holy men. He repaired relationships with major houses that had grown strained. He worked tirelessly, as he always had, treating the kingship not as glory or burden, but as a job that needed doing properly. Those who worked with him found him sharp-minded, decisive, and occasionally ruthless when necessary. He had none of Baelor's squeamishness about difficult choices. The realm began to function smoothly again, the gears of government turning as they should. Lords who petitioned the crown received actual answers rather than scripture. Justice was rendered based on law rather than religious interpretation. For one brief year, Westeros had a truly competent king, and the difference was immediately apparent to anyone paying attention. The circumstances of Viserys' death remain murky, clouded by suspicion and whispered accusations that would never be proven or disproven. In 172 AC, less than a year after taking the throne, Viserys died suddenly, and many believed that his son Aegon, later Aegon IV the Unworthy, had poisoned him to claim the crown sooner. Viserys had been healthy, with no indication of illness, and his death came at a convenient moment for an impatient heir. No proof ever surfaced, no confession was ever extracted, but the timing and circumstances were suspicious enough that the rumor persisted. Whether murdered or simply unlucky, Viserys' death robbed the realm of a king who might have restored much of what had been lost since Jaehaerys' golden age. His reign was too brief to establish a lasting legacy beyond demonstrating what might have been if competent kings lived longer and pious ones died sooner. Viserys II's true legacy lay not in his brief reign but in his decades of service that had held the kingdom together through the damaged reigns of his brother and nephews, proving that effective governance mattered more than ceremonial kingship. While Aegon III had drifted through his reign as a living ghost, and Baelor had prayed rather than ruled, Viserys had done the unglamorous work of keeping the realm functional. He had managed budgets, negotiated with lords, settled disputes, and ensured that the machinery of government continued operating even when the king was incapable or uninterested. His reward for this service was a crown he held for less than a year before death, natural or otherwise, claimed him. History would largely forget Viserys II, overshadowed by more dramatic predecessors, and especially by his disastrous son who followed. But in the councils and administrative chambers where real governance happened, Viserys' name was remembered with respect as the hand who had been better than any king, the servant who had been more powerful than his masters, the younger brother who had proven more capable than anyone who wore the crown during his lifetime. Aegon IV ascended to the Iron Throne in 172 AC and would prove to be one of the most catastrophically unfit kings in Targaryen history. A man whose appetites and corruption would poison the realm for generations after his death. From the beginning, Aegon showed little interest in governance or duty, viewing kingship primarily as license to indulge every desire without restraint or consequence. He was intelligent enough, but utterly lacking in discipline or moral character, seeking pleasure wherever it could be found regardless of cost to others or to the realm. Where his father Viserys had been competent and responsible, Aegon was dissolute and selfish. Where previous bad kings had been cruel or mad, Aegon was simply venal, turning the crown into an instrument of personal gratification rather than governance. His court became notorious for corruption, with positions and honors sold to the highest bidder, justice perverted for coin, and capable men replaced by sycophants who enabled the king's worst impulses. The rot started at the throne and spread outward, infecting the entire administration. Aegon's legendary lust would define his reign and create succession crises that would haunt the realm for 5 generations through the Blackfire rebellions. He took mistress after mistress, flaunting his affairs openly at court, humiliating his wife Queen Nerys with his constant infidelities. The chroniclers record at least 9 great mistresses, each granted titles and honors, their children acknowledged and elevated. There was Felina Stokeworth, Maggette, Barbara Bracken, Melissa Blackwood, Bethany Bracken, and most famously, Diana the Defiant, his own cousin who had been imprisoned in the Maiden Vault by Baelor. Diana bore him a son, Daemon, who would grow to be one of the greatest warriors in Westeros and the founder of House Blackfyre. But these named mistresses were merely the most prominent among countless others. Aegon bedded serving girls and noblewomen, fishwives and merchants' daughters, leaving a trail of bastards across the 7 kingdoms. Some estimates suggest he fathered over a dozen bastard children, perhaps more, scattered throughout the realm like seeds of future chaos. The treatment of his wife Nerys and the tension with his brother Aemon the Dragon Knight created one of the most painful personal dramas of the reign, revealing Aegon's capacity for casual cruelty. Nerys was delicate, pious, and reportedly had loved Aemon before being forced into marriage with Aegon. Whether she and Aemon ever acted on that love remained a matter of speculation and vicious rumor, but Aegon certainly believed it, and used that belief to torment them both. He would force Naerys to attend feasts where his mistresses were honored, making her watch as he lavished attention on other women. He questioned the legitimacy of their son Daeron, suggesting loudly that Aemon was the true father, a devastating accusation that undermined his own heir's claim. Aemon, serving as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, was sworn to celibacy and to protect the king, trapped between duty and the woman he may have loved, unable to defend her honor without breaking his vows or committing treason. When Aemon died saving Aegon from assassins in Dorne, the king showed little grief, and some whispered he had arranged the ambush himself, though no proof ever surfaced. Nerys died a few years later, worn out by difficult childbirths and years of humiliation. Among Aegon's more bizarre projects was his attempt to build enormous dragons of wood and iron to conquer Dorne, demonstrating both his ambition and his complete disconnection from practical reality. With real dragons extinct, Aegon became obsessed with recreating their power through engineering and craft. He commissioned the construction of massive mechanical dragons, wooden frameworks covered in iron scales, fitted with mechanisms to spew wildfire, designed to be transported by ships and used in warfare. The project consumed enormous amounts of gold, required hundreds of craftsmen working for years, and produced 3 monstrous creations that were technically impressive, but completely useless. They were too heavy to move effectively. The wildfire mechanisms were dangerous to their own operators, and they bore no resemblance to the terror of actual dragons. When tested, one caught fire and burned, another's mechanism exploded, killing several men, and the third simply proved impossible to maneuver. The wooden dragons became monuments to Aegon's folly, expensive toys that bankrupted the treasury while accomplishing nothing. They were eventually dismantled, the materials sold off to recoup a fraction of their cost, but the gold wasted on them could never be recovered. Aegon's corruption extended to every aspect of governance, creating a system where everything had a price and nothing was sacred. Want a position on the small council? Pay enough and it's yours, regardless of competence. Need a royal pardon for crimes? Gold could purchase absolution. Desire a title or lands? The king would grant them to anyone who could fill his coffers or provide other services. Justice became a commodity rather than a principle, with the wealthy able to escape consequences, while the poor suffered under laws the rich could buy their way around. Aegon sold monopolies to favorites, granted exclusive trading rights in exchange for bribes, and allowed corruption to flourish at every level because he personally profited from it. His hand of the king changed frequently, usually when the current one tried to impose some fiscal responsibility or objected too strongly to the king's latest excess. The competent administrators who had served his father either resigned in disgust or were dismissed for refusing to enable corruption. What remained were men willing to skim their own fortunes while the kingdom rotted from within. The great bastards, Aegon's acknowledged illegitimate children by noblewomen, became powers unto themselves, given lands, dragon's eggs, and Valyrian steel swords that elevated them to almost royal status. Daemon Blackfyre, son of Dana, was Aegon's clear favorite. Tall and handsome and skilled at arms, everything Aegon wished his legitimate son Daeron had been. Aegon gave Daemon the sword Blackfyre, the Valyrian steel blade of Aegon the Conqueror himself, a symbol of kingship that had always passed to the heir. This gift was seen by many as Aegon declaring Daemon his true heir in spirit, if not in law. Aegor Rivers, called Bittersteel, was another of the great bastards, son of Barba Bracken, a bitter and capable warrior who would become one of history's greatest commanders. Brynden Rivers, called Bloodraven, son of Melissa Blackwood, was a sorcerer and master of spies who would serve as hand of the king and later go to the wall. Shiera Seystar, daughter of Serene of Lys, was renowned as one of the most beautiful women in the realm. These bastards were given every advantage except legitimacy itself, raised to believe they were nearly equal to true-born princes and princesses, creating resentment and ambition that would explode after Aegon's death. On his deathbed in 184 AC, Aegon IV committed his final and most destructive act, legitimizing all his bastard children with a single decree that would plunge the realm into nearly a century of civil war. Whether this was deliberate malice, a last moment of sentimentality toward his natural children, or simply the addled decision of a dying man, none can say with certainty. But the effect was immediate and catastrophic. By legitimizing his bastards, Aegon gave them claims to the throne that rivaled or exceeded that of his legitimate son, Daeron. Daemon Blackfyre, the eldest and most martial of the bastards, holding the sword of Blackfyre itself, suddenly had a colorable claim to kingship. Many lords who disliked Daeron or doubted his legitimacy due to Aegon's rumors found in Daemon an alternative they could support. The seeds of rebellion were planted in Aegon's last breath, and they would sprout into 5 Blackfyre rebellions over the next 60 years. Wars that would cost tens of thousands of lives and nearly destroy the Targaryen dynasty from within. It was Aegon's final gift to the realm, chaos, conflict, and bloodshed extending decades beyond his grave. Aegon IV died grotesquely fat and diseased, his body destroyed by years of excess, a physical manifestation of the moral corruption that had characterized his reign. In his final years, he had grown so obese that he could barely move, requiring servants to help him stand or walk. His body was covered in sores that would not heal, his flesh rotting even before death claimed him. He ate and drank to excess even as his body failed, seeming to seek oblivion in consumption. When he finally died at the age of 49, there was no one to genuinely mourn him except perhaps his bastards, who owed their elevation to his favor. His legitimate son, Daeron, inherited a kingdom weakened by 12 years of corruption and mismanagement. a treasury depleted by wasteful projects, and a succession crisis that would haunt the realm for generations. Aegon's body was burned, as was Targaryen custom, but the flames could not cleanse the damage he had done or the legacy of chaos he left behind. The epithet, the Unworthy, was well earned, marking Aegon IV as perhaps the single worst king to sit the Iron Throne, a man who took every advantage of his position and perverted them all toward vice. He was not mad like some Targaryens would be, not cruel like Maegor, not weak like Aenys. He was simply corrupt, selfish, and destructive, using the crown to indulge every appetite while ignoring every responsibility. His reign proved that evil need not be dramatic or insane. Sometimes it was simply a man of ability choosing consistently to do wrong, prioritizing personal pleasure over duty, and leaving the realm worse than he found it. Future generations would look back on Aegon the Unworthy as a warning of what Targaryen rule could become when unchecked by virtue or wisdom. A demonstration that dragons alone could not make good kings, that silver hair and purple eyes meant nothing without character. The realm survived his reign, but barely, and would spend decades cleaning up the mess he created in just 12 years of determined corruption and vice. When Daeron II inherited the throne from his father Aegon the Unworthy in 184 AC, he faced the unenviable task of repairing a kingdom his father had deliberately broken, cleaning up corruption while simultaneously fighting off rebellions from his legitimized bastard siblings, who claimed the throne should be theirs. Daeron was everything his father had not been: scholarly, dutiful, concerned with justice and good governance rather than personal pleasure. He had spent his years as heir watching his father's misrule with growing horror, planning reforms he would implement when finally given the chance. But he also bore the burden of his father's insinuations about his legitimacy, the whispered suggestions that his true father was Aemon the Dragon Knight, rather than Aegon. These whispers were almost certainly false. Aegon had invented them to torment Naerys and Aemon, but they provided convenient justification for those who wanted to oppose Daeron. The new king would have to prove his worth through action rather than blood, demonstrating that legitimacy came from character and competence rather than merely from birth. Daeron's greatest diplomatic achievement came before he even took the throne: the peaceful integration of Dorne into the Seven Kingdoms through marriage rather than conquest, finally accomplishing what Dragonfire had failed to achieve for nearly 2 centuries. Daeron had arranged for his sister Daenerys to marry Prince Meryn of Dorne, and he himself had married Miriah Martell, binding the two houses together through blood in a way that made war between them nearly impossible. When Daeron became king, the formal unification followed. Dorne agreed to become part of the Seven Kingdoms, and in exchange, the Martells were allowed to keep their title of prince rather than lord, and retained significant autonomy in governing their lands. It was a diplomatic masterpiece, recognizing that some prizes could be won through negotiation that force could never secure. The Dornish had resisted the Targaryens for 187 years, had killed dragons and kings, had made every conquest attempt expensive and ultimately futile. But they accepted Daeron's marriage pact because it offered them dignity and power rather than submission. The realm was finally truly united, and not a single life had been lost to achieve it. The first Blackfire Rebellion erupted in 196 AC, 12 years into Daeron's reign, when Demon Blackfire finally claimed the throne his father Aegon had seemingly intended for him. Demon was everything a king should look like: tall, strong, handsome, a legendary warrior who wielded the sword Blackfire with devastating skill. He was beloved by the small folk who saw him as a heroic figure, and supported by many lords who either believed his claim was stronger than Daeron's or simply preferred a warrior king to a scholarly one. The realm split, though not as evenly as in the Dance of the Dragons. Daemon's support came primarily from the Reach and parts of the Riverlands, while the Crown, the North, the Vale, and Dorne stood with Daeron. The rebellion was bloody but relatively brief, culminating in the Battle of the Redgrass Field, where Daemon and his twin sons fell to arrows shot by Bloodraven, Daeron's bastard brother, who commanded the Loyalist archers. Daemon's death broke the rebellion, his supporters surrendering or fleeing to the free cities, where they would continue plotting. Daeron showed mercy to most rebels, understanding that harsh punishment would only breed more resentment, but he could not prevent the bitterness that would fuel future rebellions. Daeron's court became a center of learning and culture, a deliberate contrast to the corruption and debauchery that had characterized his father's reign. He patronized maesters and musicians, sponsored the construction of libraries and great halls, and encouraged scholarship and art throughout the realm. His small council was filled with competent administrators rather than corrupt sycophants, men chosen for their ability rather than their willingness to enable vice. He reformed the royal treasury, rooting out the worst corruption and re-establishing principles of honest accounting. He established legal reforms that made justice more accessible to common people, not just the wealthy. He sponsored tournaments and festivals that celebrated martial skill and culture rather than debauchery. While his father's court had been a place where anything could be bought and nothing was sacred, Daeron's court was orderly, functional, and focused on the actual work of governing. It was less exciting, perhaps, but infinitely more effective, and the realm prospered under this return to responsible rule. The king's personal life was marked by tragedy, as disease claimed several of his children, including his eldest sons, forcing succession through younger lines and creating the anxiety that would haunt his later years. Daeron and Miriah had many children, but the Great Spring Sickness that swept through Westeros in 209 AC killed two of his sons, including his heir. This plague devastated the realm, taking tens of thousands of lives, and even the royal family, with all their maesters and resources, could not escape its reach. Daeron himself fell ill with the spring sickness, weakened by age and grief, and died in 209 AC at the age of 57. He had reigned for 25 years, most of them peaceful and prosperous, and had proven himself a worthy king despite the circumstances of his birth. He died knowing that Dorne was finally part of the kingdom, that the worst corruption of his father's reign had been cleaned away, and that he had given the realm a quarter-century of mostly competent governance. Daeron II's legacy was that of a good king who accomplished much despite enormous obstacles, proving that wisdom and patience could achieve what force and glory often could not. He had unified the Seven Kingdoms truly for the first time, had survived a major rebellion, had reformed corrupt systems, and had governed with justice and competence. He was not remembered with the same awe as Aegon the Conqueror or Jaehaerys the Conciliator, but he had done something arguably more difficult. He had repaired what his predecessor had broken, had restored faith in Targaryen rule after his father had nearly destroyed it. The common people called him Daeron the Good, a simple epithet that spoke volumes about what they valued in a king. He had been good, not perfect, not legendary, but genuinely good, trying his best to rule justly and succeeding more often than not. In the end, that goodness was enough to secure his place in history as one of the better Targaryen kings, a man who proved that virtue and competence still mattered even in an age that seemed to value flash over substance. The Blackfyre threat did not end with Daemon's death at Redgrass Field, and Daeron knew that his bastard siblings and their descendants would continue to pose challenges to his line for generations to come. Bittersteel had escaped to the Free Cities with Daemon's surviving sons and other supporters, where they plotted and schemed, waiting for opportunities to press their claim again. Daeron could have hunted them more aggressively, could have demanded their extradition or sent assassins to eliminate the threat permanently. But he chose a different path, recognizing that martyrs were more dangerous than living pretenders. He left them in exile, watching through Bloodraven's spy network, occasionally disrupting their plots but generally allowing them to grow old and frustrated in foreign lands. This policy of containment rather than elimination was merciful, but also pragmatic. It avoided making Daemon into a legend while preventing the Blackfyres from actually threatening the realm. Future kings would face further Blackfyre rebellions, but Daeron had bought the realm decades of relative peace, and that was perhaps all any king could reasonably accomplish given the poison his father had left behind. Aerys I inherited the throne in 209 AC, after the Great Spring Sickness claimed his father Daeron II, and from the beginning it was clear that he had no real interest in actually being king. Aerys was a scholarly man, more suited to the Citadel than the Red Keep, preferring books to governance, theory to practice, and abstract knowledge to the concrete problems of rulership. He spent his days reading in his chambers, studying ancient texts about Valyria, dragons, and history, leaving the actual business of running the kingdom to his hand of the king and the small council. This would have been merely unfortunate if his hand had been incompetent, but fortunately for the realm, Bryndon rivers, called Bloodraven, served as hand throughout Aerys's reign. Bloodraven was everything Aerys was not: practical, ruthless, politically astute, and willing to do whatever necessary to maintain order. He was also feared and hated by many for his use of spies, informants, and occasionally questionable methods, but he kept the kingdom functioning while Aerys read. The Second Blackfyre Rebellion erupted during Aerys's reign in 211 AC, demonstrating that the threat from Daemon Blackfyre's descendants remained real even a generation after the First Rebellion. Daemon's son, Daemon II, invaded from the Stepstones with an army of exiles and sellswords, hoping to capitalize on the new king's perceived weakness and lack of martial ability. The rebellion was poorly timed and executed, crushed relatively quickly by loyalist forces under Bloodraven's strategic command. Daemon II was captured and executed, ending this particular attempt, but it reinforced the pattern that would continue throughout the century. Every few decades, a Blackfyre pretender would try again, and each time the crown would have to mobilize armies to defend the succession. Aerys barely seemed to notice the rebellion except as an interruption to his reading, signing the necessary orders when brought to him, but otherwise remaining disconnected from the actual conflict that threatened his throne. Aerys's marriage was loveless and apparently unconsummated, or at least unproductive, as he and his wife never produced children. Whether this was due to physical inability, lack of interest, or some other factor, the histories do not make clear. What is certain is that Aerys showed no inclination toward the sort of lechery that had characterized his grandfather Aegon IV, nor the passionate devotion that some other Targaryen kings had shown their queens. He simply seemed indifferent to his wife, to romance, to the whole business of continuing the dynasty through children. This meant that when he died in 221 AC, after 12 years of largely passive rule, the throne passed to his younger brother Maekar, rather than to a son. Aerys had been king in name only, a placeholder who wore the crown but never truly ruled, leaving behind no children, no significant achievements, and no real legacy except as a footnote about what happens when scholarly men unsuited for power somehow end up wearing crowns they never wanted in the first place. The tragedy of Aerys was not that he was evil or incompetent exactly, but rather that he was profoundly miscast, a man whose talents lay elsewhere, forced into a role he never desired and could never perform adequately. In another life, he might have been a Grand Maester, contributing to knowledge and understanding from the safety of the citadel. But as king, his indifference to governance meant opportunities were missed. Problems were ignored until they became crises, and the realm muddled through rather than thrived. He was not cruel like Maegor, not corrupt like Aegon, not mad like future Targaryens would be. He was simply absent, present in body but disconnected in spirit, more interested in the distant past than the urgent present. When he died, the realm breathed a quiet sigh of relief and moved on quickly, with Maekar taking up the crown that Aerys had never truly wanted to wear. History would remember Aerys primarily as the studious king who let others rule for him, a cautionary tale about the importance of actually wanting and engaging with power, rather than treating kingship as an unwelcome interruption to more interesting pursuits. Maekar I came to the throne in 221 AC as the fourth son of Daeron II, never expecting to be king, but finding himself there through a combination of tragedy and duty. His older brothers had died or produced no suitable heirs, and so Maekar inherited at age 48, already experienced and hardened by decades of military service and governance. Unlike his brother Aerys, who had been scholarly and passive, Maekar was a warrior king, practical and austere, respected but not particularly loved. He had served as Prince of Summerhall, ruling that province with stern efficiency, and had distinguished himself in the Blackfire Rebellion. He understood warfare, administration, and duty, but he lacked the warmth or charisma that made subjects feel affection for their ruler. He was the sort of king who would be appreciated in hindsight, his solid competence recognized only after his death when less capable rulers followed. His reign would be brief but functional, a period of relative stability between more troubled times. The burden Maekar carried was complicated by his role in the death of his brother Prince Baelor Breakspear, the beloved heir who had been everything a crown prince should be, but who died before inheriting the throne. At a trial by combat years earlier, Maekar had struck Baelor on the head in battle, and though the blow seemed minor at the time, Baelor had died from it soon after. Maekar had not meant to kill his brother. It was combat, accidents happened, but he bore the guilt for the rest of his life. Baelor had been the Golden Prince, brave and kind and wise, and his death had altered the entire succession, eventually leading to Maekar's own kingship. Some wondered if Maekar would have preferred that Baelor had lived and ruled, that the crown had passed naturally rather than through tragedy. Regardless, Maekar accepted the responsibility without complaint, as he accepted all duties, but those who knew him said he never quite forgave himself for the blow that had changed history's course. Maekar's sons presented him with a unique succession problem, as each was flawed or unusual in ways that made none of them obviously suitable heirs. Daeron was weak and ineffectual, more interested in pleasure than duty. Aegon was disturbed, possibly mad, obsessed with dragons and prone to cruelty. He would eventually die drinking wildfire in a deranged attempt to transform into a dragon. Aemon was the wisest and best, but he had become a maester, and later joined the Night's Watch, removing himself from succession. That left Aegon, the youngest, who had been sent as a squire to a hedge knight, and seemed more interested in that humble life than in kingship. This was Aegon, who would eventually be called the Unlikely, a prince no one expected to rule, but who would become one of the more interesting Targaryen kings. Mahekar worried constantly about succession, knowing that each of his sons was problematic in different ways, uncertain which would be least disastrous as king. In 233 AC, Mahekar died as he had lived, in battle, doing his duty without complaint or glory. He was putting down a rebellion by a minor lord, the sort of routine military action that should have been handled easily by a king with decades of combat experience. But in the siege of the rebel castle, Mahekar took a mortal wound. The details are sparse in the histories. Whether it was an arrow, a sword stroke, or some other weapon that found its mark, none can say with certainty. What mattered was that the king fell, and the realm was once again faced with uncertainty about succession. Mahekar had reigned for 12 years, not long enough to establish a lasting legacy, but long enough to keep the kingdom stable and functioning. He died without resolving the question of which son should follow him, leaving it to a great council to decide between the weak, the mad, the monk, and the unlikely. Mahekar's legacy was that of a dutiful, competent king who did what was necessary without fanfare or particular brilliance, holding the realm together through personal discipline and martial skill. He was not remembered with great affection, but he was respected. He had kept the peace, administered justice fairly, maintained the strength of the crown, and died serving the realm. In an era when Targaryen kings ranged from brilliant to disastrous, Mahekar represented solid competence. Not inspiring, not terrible, simply adequate in the best sense of that word. The realm would miss his steadiness more than it realized, as the succession crisis following his death would demonstrate. His death in battle was somehow fitting, a warrior king meeting a warrior's end, doing his duty to the last breath, and asking for nothing more than that service be remembered. The Great Council of 233 AC faced an impossible choice. Select between Mahekar's surviving sons, each deeply flawed, or look to other branches of the family tree. Daeron was dismissed quickly as weak and unsuitable. Aerion's young son was considered, but many feared the madness that had consumed his father might be inherited. And then someone suggested Aegon, Mahekar's youngest son, who had spent years as a squire to a wandering hedge knight named Sir Duncan the Tall. Aegon was the fourth son of a fourth son, so far down the line of succession that his becoming king seemed absurd. Hence his eventual nickname, Aegon the Unlikely. But the lords saw in him something they had not seen in Targaryen princes for generations: humility, genuine experience with common people, and an understanding of how the small folk lived. Aegon had traveled the Seven Kingdoms in disguise, had worked and fought alongside commoners, had seen poverty and injustice firsthand. The Great Council chose him not because he had the strongest claim, but because they hoped he might actually care about ruling well, rather than merely ruling. It was an odd reason to choose a king, but in hindsight, perhaps the wisest decision the lords could have made. Aegon Vai's reign was defined by his attempts to reform the realm for the benefit of the small folk, pushing laws that protected the common people against the worst abuses of their lords, but facing constant resistance from the nobility, who saw their privileges threatened. Aegon remembered what he had learned traveling with Sir Duncan, how lords treated small folk as little more than property, how justice was only for those who could afford it, how the weak had no protection against the strong. As king, he tried to change this. He pushed through laws limiting what lords could demand of their small folk, protecting women from certain abuses, and giving the poor greater access to the king's justice. He tried to limit the power of the great houses and strengthen the authority of the crown to enforce fairness. These were noble goals, but the nobility fought him at every turn. They had no interest in losing their privileges, and they had the power to resist through passive non-compliance, ignoring royal decrees or implementing them with such reluctance that they became meaningless. Aegon had the will to reform but lacked the power to force compliance without dragons or the threat of violence he was unwilling to employ. The marriages of Aegon's children became a source of constant frustration and eventual tragedy, as each refused the dynastic matches their father arranged and instead married for love, weakening the crown's alliances and political position. Aegon had planned careful marriages that would bind the great houses to the throne, political alliances that would give him the support he needed to push through his reforms. But his children, having been raised with unusual freedom and having learned from their father to value personal happiness, refused to comply. They married for love instead of duty. Noble sentiments perhaps, but politically disastrous. Each refusal weakened Aegon's position, making the great houses less willing to support a king whose own children defied him. The king who had wanted to help the common people found that even his own family would not sacrifice for the greater good he envisioned. It was a bitter lesson about the limits of good intentions, about how personal freedom and political necessity often conflicted in ways that had no good resolution. Aegon's obsession with hatching dragon eggs grew as his reign progressed, and his reforms faltered, leading to increasingly desperate attempts to restore the source of Targaryen power that had died out 70 years earlier. Without dragons, the Targaryens were just another house, and Aegon believed that with dragons returned, he could force through the changes he wanted, could protect the small folk and reform the realm without needing the nobility's cooperation. He collected dragon eggs from across the world, consulted with sorcerers and pyromancers, read ancient texts about Valyrian magic, and became convinced that he could succeed where others had failed. His obsession grew darker as he aged, and his reforms failed, until it consumed much of his attention and energy. The tragedy was that Aegon's impulse was right in a sense. Dragons had given the Targaryens the power to override noble resistance, but his methods were doomed from the start. Dragons had not been hatched in a century, and the secrets of their breeding had died with old Valyria. No amount of desperation would change that reality. The tragedy of Summerhall in 259 AC ended Aegon's reign and his dream in fire, claiming his life along with those of his eldest son and heir Prince Duncan and others of the royal family. Aegon had summoned lords and maesters to Summerhall, his favorite residence, ostensibly for a great feast, but actually for one final attempt to hatch dragon eggs through some ritual involving wildfire and possibly blood sacrifice. Exactly what happened has never been fully revealed. The few survivors spoke little of it, and the records were destroyed in the flames. What is known is that fire erupted, consuming much of Summerhall and everyone within. Aegon V died in the flames, as did Prince Duncan, Lord Commander Sir Duncan the Tall, and dozens of others. Only Aegon's grandson Rhaegar survived, born that very night amidst smoke and fire, pulled from the flames by his father. The dragon eggs did not hatch. The king's final desperate gamble to restore Targaryen power had failed catastrophically, ending not just his life but his dream of using dragons to force a better world into existence. Aegon V's legacy was deeply complex. A good man who tried to do good things, but whose methods failed, and whose desperation led to tragedy. He genuinely cared about the small folk in a way few kings had tried to use his power to protect the weak against the strong, and had pursued reform with sincere conviction. But good intentions alone could not overcome structural resistance, and his reforms largely failed during his lifetime, undone after his death by nobles who had never truly accepted them. The tragedy of Summerhall overshadowed his achievements, becoming the defining moment of his reign in historical memory. Yet, in another sense, Aegon's reign represented something important. Proof that at least some Targaryens still tried to rule justly, still believed kingship meant service rather than privilege. The small folk remembered him fondly as Aegon the Fortunate in some regions, the king who had actually cared about them even if he ultimately could not save them. His failure was noble in a way that many successes were not, and that nobility counted for something even if it changed little in the end. Jaehaerys II inherited the throne from his father Aegon V in the aftermath of the Summerhall tragedy, becoming king in 259 AC at a time when the dynasty was reeling from loss and failure. His older brother Duncan had died at Summerhall, making Jaehaerys the heir by default, though he was already in poor health even before becoming king. Jaehaerys was bookish and gentle like his father, but lacked Aegon's reformist zeal or driving ambition. He had married his sister Shera in the Targaryen tradition, defying his father's planned match and contributing to the weakening of political alliances that Aegon had tried to build. They had 2 children together, Aerys and Rhaella, who would continue the dynasty but also bring it to its eventual catastrophic end. Jaehaerys' reign would be brief, overshadowed by his father's tragic death and by what his son would become. The War of the Ninepenny Kings dominated what little foreign policy attention Jaehaerys gave during his short reign, a conflict in the Stepstones where the last significant Blackfyre pretender made his final attempt at the throne. Maelys the Monstrous, a descendant of Demon Blackfyre, had joined with 8 other would-be kings and pirates to form the Band of Nine, seizing the Stepstones and threatening trade routes. Jaehaerys sent a force to deal with this threat, and in the fighting, Maelys was killed by Sir Barristan Selmy, finally ending the Blackfyre threat that had haunted the dynasty for 5 generations. The male line of House Blackfyre died with Maelys, though rumors persisted of surviving females. It was a significant military victory, removing a threat that had caused multiple rebellions, but Jaehaerys himself had little direct involvement, the war being won by his commanders rather than through royal leadership. Jaehaerys II died in 262 AC, after only 3 years on the throne, his health having never recovered from the strain of Summerhall and the burdens of kingship. His reign was too brief to establish any real legacy. He had not reformed anything, had not built anything lasting, had not fundamentally changed the realm in any way. He was simply a transitional king, a placeholder between his father's tragic end and his son's catastrophic reign. He passed the crown to his son Aerys, and in doing so, he unknowingly sealed the fate of the Targaryen dynasty. Had Jaehaerys somehow known what Aerys would become, what horrors his son would inflict on the realm, perhaps he would have named a different heir or taken some action to prevent the coming disaster. But he died believing in the succession, trusting that his son would be a capable king, never suspecting that Aerys II would become known to history as the Mad King, who destroyed everything the Targaryens had built. When Aerys II Targaryen ascended to the Iron Throne in 262 AC at the age of 18, he seemed to promise a return to Targaryen glory, a young and vigorous king who might restore the dynasty's fading prestige. He was handsome, charismatic when he chose to be, and in his early years showed flashes of the capability that might have made him a worthy ruler. He was close friends with Tywin Lannister, the brilliant young lord who would serve as his hand of the king, and together they seemed poised to bring competence and strength back to the crown. The early years of Aerys's reign were not disastrous. The realm functioned, justice was administered, and there was hope that perhaps the Targaryens had finally produced another good king, after generations of mediocrity and tragedy. But there were warning signs even then for those who looked closely. A quickness to anger, a tendency toward suspicion, a cruelty that emerged when Aerys felt slighted. These traits would grow over time, fed by paranoia and possibly by the madness that ran in Targaryen blood, until they consumed him entirely and destroyed the dynasty he should have protected. The defiance of Duskendale in 277 AC proved to be the turning point in Aerys's descent into madness, the event that transformed him from merely difficult into genuinely dangerous. Lord Darklyn of Duskendale had imprisoned Aerys when the king visited his castle, holding him hostage for 6 months while demanding concessions from the crown. Aerys was kept in a tower, humiliated and frightened, uncertain if each day would be his last as negotiations dragged on. Ser Barristan Selmy eventually rescued the king in a daring infiltration, killing Lord Darklyn and freeing Aerys. But the king who returned to King's Landing was not the same man who had been captured. The imprisonment had broken something in Aerys's mind, unleashing paranoia that had always lurked beneath the surface. He saw traitors everywhere, trusted no one, and began to believe that everyone was plotting against him. He had Lord Darklyn's entire house extinguished, men, women, even children, in brutal executions that shocked the realm. His relationship with Tywin deteriorated as Aerys grew resentful of his hand's competence, suspicious that Tywin wanted the throne for himself. The descent into full madness had begun, and nothing could stop it. Aerys's obsession with wildfire grew throughout his reign, transforming from mere fascination into deadly paranoia, and eventually into a plan to destroy King's Landing itself, rather than see it fall to his enemies. Wildfire was the substance closest to dragonfire that still existed, the last remnant of the power that had once made Targaryens great, and Aerys became convinced it was the key to his safety and glory. He commanded the pyromancers to produce it in vast quantities, storing thousands of jars throughout King's Landing in hidden caches. He spoke of purging his enemies in fire, of burning traitors, of using wildfire to destroy anyone who opposed him. The pyromancers encouraged this obsession because it gave them influence and resources, never considering the horror of what they were enabling. By the end of his reign, Aerys had positioned enough wildfire throughout the capital to destroy the entire city, turning 1 million people into ash in moments. His plan was mad but methodical. If he could not rule King's Landing, no one would have it. He would burn it all, every building and every soul, in one final apocalyptic gesture of power. The execution of Rickard and Brandon Stark marked the point of no return, the atrocity that finally sparked open rebellion and demonstrated that Aerys was beyond reason or mercy. Brandon Stark had ridden to King's Landing demanding that Prince Rhaegar answer for allegedly kidnapping his sister Lyanna. Aerys arrested Brandon and his companions, then summoned their fathers to court to answer for their sons. Treason. When Lord Rickard Stark arrived, Aerys declared a trial by combat, but rigged it in the cruelest way imaginable. Rickard was suspended in his armor above a fire while Brandon was placed in a strangulation device with a sword just out of reach. As Rickard burned, Brandon strangled himself trying desperately to reach the sword and save his father. Both died horribly while Aerys watched and laughed, claiming fire was the champion of House Targaryen. The executions were legal by the strictest reading of royal prerogative, but they were so manifestly unjust and cruel that they destroyed any remaining legitimacy Aerys possessed. Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark, betrothed to Lyanna and Brandon's best friend respectively, had just watched their loved ones murdered by a mad king. Rebellion became inevitable. Robert's rebellion consumed the realm from 282 to 283 AC, as the great houses chose sides and armies marched to either defend or overthrow the Mad King. The North, the Riverlands, the Stormlands, and eventually the Vale rose against Aerys, while the Crownlands, the Reach, and Dorne fought for him, though more from obligation than love. It was a devastating civil war that killed thousands and showed the realm that the Targaryens could be beaten, that dragons were truly gone, and that mad kings could be removed by force. The decisive blow came at the Battle of the Trident, where Robert Baratheon killed Prince Rhaegar in single combat, shattering the last hope that the war might somehow end without Aerys falling. As Robert's army marched on King's Landing, Aerys made his final desperate plans to activate the wildfire and burn everything. He had given the order, burn them all, repeating it over and over, determined that if he must fall, the city would die with him. Jaime Lannister, a knight of the Kingsguard sworn to protect Aerys with his life, made the choice that would define him forever. He killed the king he was sworn to defend, stabbing Aerys in the back to prevent the destruction of King's Landing. Jaime had listened to Aerys's growing madness, had watched him plan the city's destruction, and in the final moments when the king commanded him to bring him Tywin's head and repeated the order to burn the city, Jaime acted. He killed Aerys, then hunted down and killed the pyromancers who might carry out the wildfire plan. When Robert's forces entered the throne room, they found Jaime sitting on the Iron Throne, Aerys's body at the base of the steps, blood still spreading across the floor. Jaime had saved 1,000,000 lives by killing one man, but the act earned him the nickname Kingslayer, and a reputation for dishonor that would follow him for life. Few knew or cared that he had prevented an atrocity. They only saw a Kingsguard who had broken his oath. Aerys II died at age 40, killed by one of his own sworn protectors, his reign ending in blood and betrayal as it perhaps had to. The Mad King was dead, and with him died the Targaryen dynasty's 3-century rule over Westeros. The legacy of Aerys II was one of utter destruction. He had taken a dynasty that had ruled for 300 years and destroyed it in a single generation through madness and cruelty. Where his ancestors had built, he had torn down. Where they had forged alliances, he had created enemies. Where they had inspired loyalty, he had provoked rebellion. His paranoia had driven away competent advisors like Tywin. His cruelty had alienated every great house. His madness had made Targaryen rule unbearable. In one generation, he had undone what Aegon the Conqueror had built, what Jaehaerys the Conciliator had perfected, what Daeron the Good had restored. The great irony was that Aerys had been terrified of losing power, paranoid about plots and betrayals, desperate to hold on to the throne. And in his fear, he had done everything necessary to ensure he would lose it all. A wiser king might have maintained Targaryen rule for centuries more. A kinder king might have been loved rather than feared. A saner king might have recognized that his own actions were his worst enemy. But Aerys possessed none of these qualities, and so he became the king who ended the Age of Dragons, the last Targaryen to truly sit the Iron Throne, and a cautionary tale about how madness and power combine to destroy everything they touch. The fall of House Targaryen was not inevitable. It was the result of specific choices made by specific people, and Aerys made every wrong choice available. He had inherited a stable kingdom, loyal Kingsguard, capable advisors, and the benefit of 3 centuries of institutional knowledge about how to rule. He squandered all of it. He transformed the dynasty's greatest strengths into weaknesses through his paranoia, turning the Kingsguard into witnesses to atrocity, advisors into enemies, and the Iron Throne into a symbol of tyranny rather than justice. When he died, bleeding on the floor of his own throne room, killed by a knight he had trusted to protect him, it was a fitting end for a reign built on betrayal and fear. The Mad King was dead, the dynasty was broken, and the dragons were truly gone. 300 years of fire and blood ended not with glory, but with a king's corpse cooling on stone, while 1 million people lived only because a kingslayer had broken his oath. That was the legacy of Aerys II Targaryen. Destruction, madness, and the end of everything his ancestors had built.